there, friends. Welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. Today we're going to change gears a little bit and we're going to talk about Tales of the Underworld. Go figure. Disney only releases like 2 major shows this year and they decide to do it all at the same time. This really isn't cool because Tales of the Underworld is actually really cool. I feel like it deserves its own time slot. I feel like ever since the 7th season of the Clone Wars, Disney has really figured out this whole animation stuff, and the Tales series does a great job at expanding on classic Clone Wars characters that deserve to see their stories play out. The only complaint people seem to have about Tales is that there's not enough. This time around, we're going to be talking about Asajj Ventress, Sith assassin, the Banshee, and all-around extremely unlikable villain who was first introduced to us in the original Clone Wars cartoon in 2003. She was this very ugly and terrifying character who was known for her deadly dual-wielding Mikasi techniques. In many ways, she was kind of like the female version of Darth Maul. She also hailed from the world of Dathomir, and she also served the Sith under Count Dooku. And man, I remember hating her a lot as a 10-year-old. Like, she was the scariest thing in Star Wars at the time. But since then, we've seen Asajj in multiple seasons of the Clone Wars, some really awesome books like Dark Disciple and Dooku Jedi Lost. There's also that surprise appearance of her in The Bad Batch. And so her story has become far more fleshed out. She's far more complex than the living weapon she portrayed in her earlier years. She's actually been given a pretty full character arc, and now we see a very mature and different version of Asajj, who, like her fans, have also, grown up a lot in the last 20 years, gone through a lot of hardships. It's kind of funny, like, we really did grow up with a lot of these characters from the Clone Wars, and it's almost fitting that, like, Tales of the Underworld is only 15 minutes long, because, like, most people who are adults now in their 20s, 30s, and 40s, we just don't have time. We spend most of our day doing things we don't want to do just so that we can have, like, an hour of free time at night, and then when we get to that moment, we're often too tired to do anything anyway. So, if you are young and you're watching this, go enjoy yourselves. Please do while you still have time. Now, if you don't have time to watch Tales of the Underworld, it's actually kind of a shame because I actually think Asajj Ventress' story is very important. It's probably one of the more important ones in the Clone Wars because of the lesson we learn from it. Not many Force users have lived through what Asajj Ventress has been through. I can count maybe a few dozen and even less during the specific Skywalker saga era. You see, Asajj has been trained by both the Jedi and also by the Sith. She's also committed herself to the Night Sister branch of Force magic. There have been other characters, who have played around with both the light and dark side of the Force. Individuals like our own master Dooku, and one of her more frequent enemies, Anakin Skywalker, but both of these individuals either died as a Sith or died, in Anakin's case, shortly after liberating himself from the dark side. As in, they never really had a chance to live free with that very complex view of both sides of the Force. The fact that Asajj Ventress has lived through both the Jedi, Sith, and also the Night Sister training, and continues to journey through the world is quite rare. It puts her in the company of elite individuals like Revan and her former lover, Quinlan Vos. The strength it takes to endure and learn both extreme ideologies of the Force and then to come out as your own woman, that's not common. This is why Asajj Ventress' knowledge, her wisdom, is actually priceless. It makes her a very important character. In Tales of the Underworld, we find Asajj Ventress in the early Empire period, looking for simple jobs as an enforcer for one of the local travel agents, or is she a people trafficker? I don't really know. But a young Jedi by the name of Lyko appears, and in a very clumsy way tries to use a Jedi mind trick to get free passage off the planet, which is now overrun by Imperial patrols looking for Order 66 survivors. One thing leads to another, and Asajj Ventress goes out of her way to basically help Lyko escape. This is a very big deal for someone like Asajj Ventress. Now, she had already started changing in the last few years of the Clone Wars, especially when she teamed up with Ahsoka, but her actions here in the Tales of the Underworld marks a new chapter in her character development. This is the new Ventress. The old Ventress would have leapt at the chance to kill the Jedi to please her master Count Dooku. She spent the entire first few years of the war risking her life doing horrendous things for the Sith, and every time she failed, she was tortured and berated. She was very much caught in the madness of the dark side, the extreme chaos of that ideology. And then at one point during the Clone Wars, in the middle of the Battle of Solus, Count Dooku just betrays her and commands her own droid army to kill her. We found out later that Dooku was under pressure from his own master, Palpatine, to cut Asajj loose. But a lesson was learned at that point. The Sith were not to be trusted. They use other people like tools, and, whenever those tools are no longer useful, they discard them very easily. Now, this was a very difficult moment for Asajj Ventress. Not only did she almost die, it was a cruel reminder of all the tragedy she had suffered, before this. Because all of her life, Asajj Ventress has been thrown away by people who she thought actually cared for her. She's actually an extremely tragic figure. As a child, she was given away by her Dathomir Night Sister mother to a criminal boss named Halstead. It was said that this was done to secure peace for her clan, but it's a pretty tragic thing to do to a child. Now, Halstead, you'll start to see a pattern emerge, viewed the young child as a potential weapon that he could use when she's older. The mobster actually treats Asajj with great kindness in order to make sure she is loyal. But nonetheless, what he's really interested again is her fighting abilities and not who she is as a person. Halstead would be killed when Weequay pirates invade the city they were living in, and a young Ventress would find herself alone, but she'd be found just in time by Kai Narek, a Jedi Knight, who actually reminds me a lot of Quinlan Vos. You see, Narek wasn't really interested in Jedi politics. Actually, he really liked being as far away from Coruscant as possible, doing whatever he could to help the average person. He was focused on, the small picture on the ground, not the big picture, the politics, and all that other stuff. Narek, seeing Asajj's force abilities, would begin to train her as his apprentice. Asajj Ventress took to her teachings very well. She found purpose, and she also enjoyed the warmth that her new master gave her. And actually, for 21 years, these two would fight criminals, bandits, pirates. They would just defend innocent people. And so Asajj Ventress technically was a Jedi longer than she was a Sith, or anything else for that matter. But then during one battle, tragedy strikes and Narek gets killed. Asajj Ventress basically goes completely to the dark side, fueled by bloodlust, and she unleashes her full dark side potential on all of the criminal elements on the planet. Now, the crazy thing is, the Jedi Temple knew about Narek and Asajj. They knew that he died, and still they never sent anyone to recover Narek's body or to bring Asajj into the Order. I mean, here was a Padawan who desperately still needed guidance and training. But I guess they viewed Asajj just like they viewed Anakin, as not someone that fit their ideal image of a Jedi. Maybe she was too old, maybe she was too indoctrinated already. Maybe they didn't believe that Narek did a good job training her. Or maybe Narek's standing with the Jedi Council was just not good. But the end result is she felt completely betrayed by the Jedi. She turned away from them and would find refuge with the Sith. It made sense for her to do this, up until this point, no one really cared for her, right? Not the criminal that raised her, not the Jedi, not even her own mother. And so that emptiness she felt, that void inside her, which normally is filled with love and a sense of belonging, she began to fill it with hate. But not even that could sustain her, because, hatred and anger, these things are not really, positive or healthy emotions to have. After she was betrayed by Count Dooku at the Battle of Solus, Asajj Ventress sought revenge. She convinced her entire Dathomir Night Sister clan to try to take out Count Dooku and got them all killed as a result. So yeah, revenge, hatred, anger, all those things didn't solve kind of the hurt she was feeling inside. But then something crazy happened. In the last year of the Clone Wars, the Jedi, who were already completely lost by this point, decided to commission an assassination mission against Count Dooku. I believe this was right after Count Dooku ordered Confederate forces to open fire on a refugee convoy in the Outer Rim. A lot of innocent people got killed, and this is what kind of pushed the Jedi in this direction. They wanted to end the war, but they were still crossing a line by setting up this hit, which is ironic because the whole reason why they joined the Republic's war against the Separatists in the first place was because they wanted to restore law and order. Now they were clearly breaking one of the fundamental laws of not just the Republic, but of the Jedi Order's code. This also probably explains why Mace Windu tries to kill Palpatine instead of just arrest him in his office. The Jedi by this point had been completely radicalized by all of the suffering and destruction that war causes. They felt helpless. They felt like they couldn't, carry out their mandate to protect the galaxy. Quinlan Vos was instructed to carry out the gruesome task, and the Jedi recommend that he connect with Asajj Ventress, who by this point was an ex-Separatist leader who had lost her entire Night Sister family. She was basically just moping around the galaxy taking bounty hunter jobs. This whole meeting was set up to fail because, again, the Jedi are now looking at Asajj Ventress as a human being, as a person with feelings. They're looking at her as a weapon, as someone who can give them intel about Count Dooku's weaknesses, as someone who could help train Quinlan Vos to counter Dooku's many, special force powers. They don't realize that, Asajj Ventress lost her entire family pursuing this avenue of revenge, and then now they're trying to suck her back in. So it's all completely messed up that they're doing this. Naturally, once Asajj figures out what's going on, she's really upset. But here's the thing, Quinlan Vos was different from most Jedi. It wasn't just that he loved working with the criminal underworld, he also was viewed as kind of a rogue Jedi who used unorthodox methods, death sticks, and was quite rebellious. Now, Quinlan was a very passionate and empathetic person, and he would actually spend a lot of time training and just talking with Asajj, and the two would grow close. They would also connect with each other in the Force, and I think this really helped these two understand each other very well. I think no one really understood Asajj Ventress as well as Quinlan did. While everyone was terrified by this ex-Sith assassin, once Quinlan got to know Asajj, all he saw were like the positive sides of her, like her strength, all of the, scars she has, wounds that she had to forcibly heal as a child and as a teenager when she suffered so much loss. Quinlan understood her story, how she'd been betrayed by everyone she ever knew. And despite the fact that no one ever gave her a chance, she wasn't exactly bitter about that. As a matter of fact, she expressed regret over some of the things she had done as a Separatist commander during the Clone Wars, for instance. Quinlan Vos was the first person to really see Asajj Ventress like this, not as a tool, a weapon of war, but as a human being, a person with very complex emotions, but with a lot of strength, and most importantly, a lot of good inside of her, despite all the crazy shit she saw. And I think it's at that moment he falls in love with Asajj, and when Asajj feels that warmth and love from Quinlan, she can't help but reciprocate it. This is why the first scene in Tales of the Underworld on Dathomir is so crazy and amazing to see on screen. You see, this is exactly what happens at the end of Dark Disciples, which is the novel that covers that crazy story between Quinlan Vos and Asajj Ventress trying to assassinate Dooku. I highly recommend it. It was a book I read a long time ago. I went in not knowing what to expect, and it's really one of the best books for that time period, especially if you like Force users, debates about the light and dark side. It's excellent. You see, at the end of the Dark Disciple novel, Asajj Ventress dies while confronting Dooku. At the time, Quinlan Vos had become a prisoner of the Sith Lord and had been turned to the dark side. Asajj Ventress came to confront Dooku not to kill him, but to actually save Quinlan Vos. It's this one act of pure, unconditional love that kind of frees Quinlan Vos from the dark side. Unfortunately, Asajj dies during that encounter, and Obi-Wan and Quinlan Vos are bringing her back to Dathomir to lay her to rest in the water of life with the rest of her family. Once she submerges into the water, she's met by the spirit of Mother Talzin, who gives her a choice to stay with her sisters in the land of the dead or to return to the land of the living. But if she chooses the latter, she loses her heart's desire. That is a freaking Disney princess curse if I've ever seen one, so congratulations, Asajj. You are now a Disney princess. It's clear that this is just the beginning of Asajj Ventress' return to the living. I'm not really sure if she's meant to break this curse, Mother Talzin's curse on her, right? I think eventually she will find her way back to Quinlan and they should fall back in love or something. Because again, no one, I think, in Star Wars deserves a second chance more than Asajj at this point, seeing what she's gone through. And this reformed, rehabilitated, reanimated Asajj is very different. I mean, this is why when Lyko opens that door in that little transit station that she's working in, Asajj quickly tries to hide him from that Imperial patrol. She had been watching the young boy try and fail to use a Jedi mind trick on her boss, and I think she immediately feels pity for him. If there's one thing that Asajj Ventress can empathize with, it's a young Force user who has been abandoned and now, on the run. It's also a sign that Asajj Ventress can feel. I mean, that her heart isn't completely encased in stone anymore. There is still some good to Asajj Ventress, what Quinlan Vos did for her that still exists. She already redeemed herself, and then she died, and now she's kind of back, and she can't fall in love with Quinlan Vos, so she kind of has to find a new purpose. Like, why is she back, right? Well, this time around, she has a lot of wisdom, right? Having learned many lessons about the world, she has learned that extreme beliefs, organizations like the Sith and the Jedi all have useful things to teach, but ultimately only serve their own interests. Even the Night Sisters, from a certain point of view, welcomed her back because she was not just one of them, but a weapon that could be used to bring them power. And ultimately, it was a rebel like Quinlan Vos who saved her, who opened her eyes and her heart. Quinlan Vos showed her that she could believe in her own strength, to trust in her own abilities to navigate the world without some faction or master to tell her what to do. And most importantly, Quinlan Vos really does love Asajj. And this warmth, this embrace, this sense of belonging she gets from Quinlan Vos, it really does make her feel whole for the first time in her life. And that's important. You know, when people reach this stage in their life, and not everyone does, right? It's a true luxury for some of us, but when you reach this stage in life where you become whole, where you finally understand who you are, your hierarchy of needs are all met, you begin to have like a moral awakening of sorts. It's a shift from self to others. It's a shift from ego to altruism. It's at this point when an adult truly becomes an adult and they stop just thinking about themselves and they start thinking about others, how they can help their community. You know, this comes in many forms. Some people have kids, some people have pets, some people, volunteer in their community or maybe sponsor kids or mentor young folks. But it's this idea that we've reached a certain stage where we no longer are struggling to take care of ourselves, and now we're finally able to give back and help other people. This is how healthy societies grow. And this isn't a completely selfless endeavor. You know, altruism also brings deeper meaning to a person's life. I think a lot of people do this not just to help others, but to, help themselves feel more connected and grounded in reality, especially in this world we live in where most of us are working pretty meaningless jobs, right? In the case of a Force user's progression, once they reach this state in their life, it often means taking on a new apprentice and passing on one's knowledge of the Force to the next generation. Asajj might not realize this because she acted on instinct, but Lyko is probably going to be sticking around now. I mean, that guy had an opportunity to join the path, but after seeing Asajj in action just a few times, I think he has developed trust and a friendship with Asajj. I think Lyko understands that the Jedi have failed and that it's time to learn more from someone like Asajj, who has walked on both sides of the Force and also the barrier that divides the living from the dead. Young Lyko is smart enough to see that Asajj is probably more capable, more balanced than any Jedi survivor he could find in his path. And I think also young Lyko will help Asajj continue to grow and heal and become more of a normal human being. Overall, I really loved this small little story. Did it need to be broken up into 3 15-minute episodes? Probably not. It could have just been one thing. But I hope they revisit this again because it seems like they're building up Asajj Ventress for more stuff. I used to really hate this character, but after reading Dark Disciple, she just really grew on me, and I would love to see, further content with her, maybe even in live action one day. Who knows? 10 years ago, if you told me we were having all the stuff we have now, I would have been like, you're lying. But yeah, let's hope we see more of her. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. As usual, my name is Alan, reminding you that my allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy. I'll see you next time.